Mike Morgan.
Thank you. My name is Michael Morgan. I'll start with a little bit of history of where I came from and why I think I know why I'm talking about here tonight. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. I am by training a research polymer chemist, which has nothing to do with this, but I attended Eastern Kentucky University and the University of Louisville, and I spent most of my career working in polymer chemistry. And I currently am the assistant curator at the Museum and Library of Confederate History, where I set up displays and do that sort of thing. And I've been collecting antique arms for about 45 years. So I've bought as many fake ones as anyone out there, and you learn from your mistakes. But you also learn how to lick it and tell if it's the real thing. So I'm going to start with, my talk tonight is about swords and blades of the Revolution. The most used blade of the Revolutionary War was the bayonet. Now this is only half a bayonet, and I considered bringing a reproduction in to show you what a full-size one looks like, but I just decided I'd bring this instead. This is, a lady found this in her flower bed in Greensboro, North Carolina. So this is an artifact from the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. I don't know if it was hit by a deep cultivator and broken two, or both armies, both the British and the American Army, had a hard time keeping their soldiers from using their bayonets as spits to cook meat on, hold it over the fire, and constantly heating it and cooling it, heating it and cooling it makes it brittle, and they would break at usually a very inopportune time. And that's probably what happened to this, because it was broke a long, long time ago. But I like it simply because it's an artifact from that battle. The first sword is probably one of the most copied swords of the Revolutionary War. For every real one, there are at least 100 fake ones. But this is a real one, and if you want to ask why later on, I'll explain it to you, but it'll take too long to explain right now. But this is the pattern 52. And they did not really have patterns then. It's just the first instance of one of these swords showing up in an artwork was made in 1752, the painting was. So that's the reason they call it that pattern. These were an infantryman's hanger, is what it's called. And at that time, in 1752, all infantry soldiers carried a sword. In the, I think it was 1768 ordinance, they changed it so only sergeants, grenadiers, and highlanders carried swords. And the grenadiers carried swords similar to this. The highlanders were carrying claymores, and most of them did not carry them into battle because they were bulky and cumbersome and they never used them anyway. But they wanted to be able to wear them on parade, so they were allowed to. This sword was issued to the British troops and to American colonials in the French and Indian War. And that's where this sword probably comes from. They were rarely marked in any way because every soldier got one. So they didn't really feel the need to mark them. And the militia laws in what is now the United States, the colonies at the time, were required that each militiaman have either a bayonet fitted to his gun, a cutting sword, which this would be, or a hatchet, or belt axe, or tomahawk, whatever you want to call them. And so a lot of soldiers in the colonial army carried these. A lot of the militia did, at least at the beginning of the war. They too found that they were very not of a lot of use, actually, because a man with a bayonet is going to skewer you before you can get close enough to use this on him. And you're better off with your bayonet. Learn how to use that. But they were used. Now this next sword is an officer's short saber. This is a British officer's sword. The handle is made of buffalo horn. And by buffalo, we're talking about Cape buffalo or water buffalo from India, or Cape buffalo from South Africa, which was a rather exotic material at the time. The hilt is iron. This one has been drilled right here for a ring, and which was actually a later thing. 1785, that was the big fad of that ring. But when you get a chance to come up here and look at these, you'll see that it's drilled off center and it's at a slight angle. So it was drilled while the sword was already put together. So this was just someone trying to update their sword. But this sword was probably made in around 1775 by the blade design. And foot officers particularly carried this kind of sword in combat. The next sword here is a civilian small sword. And if I can wrap my tongue around this, it has what is called a calacamardi blade, which is it's thick at the top, narrows very quickly, and goes to a needle point. These were dueling swords, basically. Civilians used these for almost 100 years, various types of them. Most officers in the Revolutionary War, on both sides, this is the kind of sword they carried, because it was a symbol of rank. The higher the officers' rank, the less likely they were to actually see combat. And this is what they would carry, because it's light, and they would have one. George Washington had 4 of these, I think, different styles. 3 of which he had purchased himself, and he was given one by his men as well. But this particular sword has a coin silver hilt and the silver wire wrap around a wooden grip. This next sword is a cavalryman's sword, or a dragoon. There were very, very few cavalrymen actually in the Revolutionary War. They were dragoons. They would fight on horseback or on foot, either one. It's a slashing blade, and it looks very heavy and cumbersome, but it's not. It actually is fairly light, and you can slice and dice someone with this pretty easily, actually, especially on horseback. A lot of the heavy cavalry, which the British had heavy cavalry, but they did not have them in America. They were in the continent. And the heavy cavalry would use a straight sword rather than the saber with the curved blade, because the point kills, the blade just wounds the edge. But this particular sword, the blade is probably French. Swords of that period that were being purchased from France, they would ship them just the blades. They would be you can put flat blades, you can put 100 of these in a box. It would be kind of heavy, but it doesn't take up a lot of room. And room is what is expensive on a ship, not weight. And the hilt was put on here in America. It's brass, and the grip is cherry wood. This was probably used by an American dragoon. It's the kind of sword that William Washington or Light Horse Harry Lee's men would carry. This next sword is a Hessian Jaeger's sword. It's what's called a hunting sword. These were very common in Europe, but it meets all of the description of a Jaeger sword. They usually had about a 18 to 20 inch blade. This was 19 inches. They have the grip is larger at the back than at the front, and the grip portion is normally either stag or horn. This is horn. And the decoration on it is usually either running game or, in this case, rather Rubenesque women, let's say. And it's a very abstract design. It's not really realistic. And it was very common on swords of that period. And we think this is a Jaeger sword because this sword has definitely seen combat. Most of these swords were used for dispatching game, wealthy people when they would go hunting. If they shot a deer and didn't kill it immediately, they'd stick it in the neck with this and cut its throat, then it'd be dead. But this one has seen some serious combat. It has some big hunks knocked out of it, which you'll be able to see when you come up and look at these. So I believe this to be a Jaeger sword. It's been here in America for a long time, and the people who had it had no idea what it was or where it came from. The next most used piece was the belt axe, or hatchet, or tomahawk, if you will. This particular one is hand forged. It was pieces of metal that were wrapped around a mandrel and hammer forged together with a hardened steel bit at the end of it that would hold an edge. The rest of the axe head is, if you will, is soft steel, soft iron. And this is what's called a round-eyed axe. They're not really round. All it means is it's bigger at the top than it is at the bottom. And the handle was made to go in from the top and be driven down. Whereas most modern axes are put together just the opposite way. You put it in from the bottom and put a wedge in it and spread the top, and that holds it in place. These were made just the opposite of that. And it's actually kind of a triangular shape, but it's called a round-eyed axe. I also have an example here of a axe head. This is a felling axe. Engineers and whatnot would have used these. And it's made the same way. It was hammer forged out of one piece of steel wrapped around a mandrel. And without a handle in it, you can see very easily that it is bigger around at the top than it is at the bottom. So the handle was put in from the top. It hammered down. Now this last hatchet is probably 19th century, not 18th. But I brought it along simply because it's an unusual style and they would have existed back then, and people in the militia would have used what they had. It's called a facing hatchet. And if you look at it, you'll see it's only tapered on one side. And the reason for that was what this was used for was for taking a log and they would chop into it, make cuts, and then they hit it this way and flatten the edges to make it square. So they'd square the logs with hatchets like this. This would be used like for around the small wood around windows and stuff like that. Big logs, like for a cabin, were usually there's an axe that was used for that. You get more bite out of an axe. But this was for small pieces, just cutting them into pieces. But I'm sure a lot of those showed up. Now this next piece is an espantoon, or a spandoon, as you're usually called. And what it was a symbol of rank. officers in the British Army and the American Army, this is what they carried on the field. And this would be for junior officers, lieutenants, captains, men who were on foot. Men on horseback did not carry these. And this particular piece was found in the rafters of a barn in Spartanburg County a couple of years back. No one knows where it came from or why it was up in the rafters of that barn, but being from that part of the country, this is probably a militia officer, and you know, this could have been a captain's. Who knows? It's an interesting piece. A lot of these, and this one probably at one time, or at least was made to have them, had a crossbar here. No particular reason, but a lot of them did. This one does not have it, but there's a strange knot there where they could have put one in if they wanted to. This was made by a blacksmith. Again, it was hammer forged.
How much of a shaft would that have had?
This would have been on probably a 7-foot pole. So it would be pretty tall. The officers, as I say, carried these. Sergeants carried what's called a halberd, which is basically the same thing, only it would have an axe blade on it also. Two of them over here in the museum now. So stop by there and look at them before you leave. Those are about the right size pole, about 6 to 7 foot. And like I say, sergeants carried those. Officers, junior officers carried in this spot too. This is a pike head. It's probably a fishing pike. So these were used mostly by the Navy and the mariners at the time. Although I believe some of the Marblehead men at the Battle of Trenton were armed with these. This would be on again about a 7-foot pole, and it's just a spear, basically. These were quite useful on shipboard, particularly for repelling boarders, because you got a guy trying to come across the distance between two boats. So you got a nice long pole with a spear where you don't even know it. You can keep him from getting on board your ship. This is a typical dagger of the period. It's just a wooden, nothing special. It's got a very simple grip, wood, brass. The tip's been broken off. But this was probably made again by a blacksmith, probably. And this is what would be called a belt dagger. This could have been made anywhere between 1750 and 1850. And there's no really way of knowing this style was in use during that entire time. So it's really hard to say. Now this dagger is a lot easier to date. You can see it has a pointed top and a barrel-shaped handle. And the purpose of that was to take that and whack someone on the head with it. And a man wearing a helmet, that would go right through his helmet. These were used in World War I and World War II for just that purpose. And most people think, well, that was invented. No, this goes back long before that. So this was made during a time when men wore helmets, which places this in the 17th century. This is probably from about 1650. It also has a very sharp needle point, which was made to go between the pieces of armor, plate armor. I got this at an auction up in North Carolina, actually. It was said to be a Revolutionary War piece, and it was certainly here during the Revolutionary War, but whether it was used or not, I don't know. But this is probably more like from the English Civil War period. But weapons like this were used. Now this is a typical pocket knife of the period, folding knife. It has just a wooden grip. The only really unusual thing about it is the rivets are iron rivets with brass washers around them. And that was very common in the 18th century. Also, there was no nail nick in the blade. It's made to take hold of, because they didn't have milling machines back in the 18th century, so they couldn't cut that nail nick. At least not easily. It could have been done, but it would have been extremely expensive to do so. But this was a very common pocket knife, probably very inexpensive at the time. And this last folding knife is a sailor's knife. This was made to be worn on a lanyard around his neck, and it's gravity fed, there's no spring in it. The blade, you take the blade across a piece of rope, take a belaying pin and hit it, cut down through the rope, cutting rope. And it's got a marlin spike on the end of it. The handle is made out of brass, actually. It's very dark because it's very old. But the marlin spike was used for untying wet knots. You would get in there and pull the pieces apart. And also it was used for in splicing rope on shipboard. Now this is a nice 18th century piece that you don't see every day. And the last piece I have is interesting. It's a Flintlock pistol, and this is a pocket pistol, usually used for self-defense. And after you have shot the person, if there's another one, this is another example of a bayonet. I have seen blunderbusses with bayonets like this on them, and larger pistols as well. It's kind of a neat piece. And that should outdo it. If anyone has any questions?
I did notice the handles on these swords seem to be very small when you was holding them. So individuals back then had to be smaller people than they are today.
Typically they were. I mean, you know, there were exceptions. George Washington was 6'4".
Yeah.
You know, but he was an exceptionally large man for the time period. The average person was probably about my size, about 5'6".
In Ellicott City, Maryland, all the ceilings are about 6 feet. In the old houses.
Yep. Yeah, most cabins had relatively low ceilings. A lot of houses had very high ceilings, but that was for the furniture to fit into, more so than for the people.
Do you see left-handed swords? Most or all of those have right?
Not really. The left-handed swords would be very unusual, and they would have to be custom made. You know, you would have to have that made.
I imagine uniform called for the sword to be on the right side. So the unfortunate left-handed person is just left to flail out.
Yep. Yep.
That's me. I'm left-handed on the door.
There are some swords that, swords like this could be used on either hand. It's just the guard to protect the hand a little more is on the wrong side for that. This sword wouldn't make any difference. use either hand. It'd be the same. Same with the cavalry saber. It would be the same either way.
You said something about a taste test?
Well, after a while, you get used to looking at metal and you can tell if it's been artificially aged or if it's natural. We like to joke and say, I can lick it and tell you how old it is. But it's more just a visual thing. Being a chemist, I have a lot of training in how to do things like that. I can make metal look old, but I can tell the difference. And anyone who's really good at it can tell the difference. Yes?
Were infantry officers or artillery, were they actually required to carry swords?
Who's that?
Were officers actually required to have a sword? Or was that their own choice?
I believe the regulations called for officers in the British Army at least to have swords.
Okay.
It was a symbol of their rank. Same with the Esperanto. They didn't have to use it, but they had to have it. In fact, in the Revolutionary War, a lot of officers carried what were called fusils. There was an officer's fusil, which is usually a smaller version of the musket. But a lot of the commanding generals, Cornwallis, for example, did not really like his officers to carry fusils because I don't need another musket man. I need an officer out there leading the men. Anybody can stand there and shoot. This is the way they looked at it. But a great many did indeed use fusils. Same with the sergeants in the British Army. A lot of them carried fusils rather than the halberd. It was up to the commander of each regiment, the colonel in charge of that regiment, what his men used. And the officers were required to buy their own weapons. They weren't issued any. So that's the reason there's no uniformity really in swords or pistols or anything like that for officers until the Napoleonic Wars, actually. I think it was 1786 or 96, not certain which, 96 I believe, that the British ordinance dictated what kind of swords officers were supposed to carry, what colors, and if the buttons on your coat are gold, then you need to have gold hilt or brass. If your coat buttons are silver, then you do silver hilt. And also the lacing on their coats and stuff like that was all made uniform at that point.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.